Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're diving into something most of us have pretty fixed ideas about. What makes meat good or bad for you? You know, we hear it constantly. Red meat bad, white meat, okay, fish, great. But, well, what if that popular belief is just way off? We're going to unpack a fascinating source today. It's a transcript from Dr. Sten Eckberg, where he takes on what he actually calls the #1 most dangerous meat in the world.
Yeah, and our mission here is really to get past those simple labels. We want to explore the nuances, the hidden details, the different kinds of fats, the truth about cholesterol, and maybe surprisingly, how much it matters how an animal was raised and what happens to the meat after processing. It seems that changes the whole picture.
Okay, let's dive right in, because what this source challenges right from the start, well, you might expect it to confirm the usual suspects, right? But no, right away, it calls that common opinion: red meat bad, chicken okay, fish best, extremely simplified and misguided.
It even says completely wrong.
Exactly, completely wrong.
That's quite a strong opening statement. And the source suggests this sort of flawed belief often comes down to assumptions about like saturated fat and cholesterol. But it argues you really need to look closer at the details to see why those assumptions just don't quite hold up.
Okay, let's start right there then with fat. The source looks at total fat first, and it points out, total fat varies massively. It really depends on the cut you choose. A lean beef or pork cut might have, 5-6% fat, but a fattier one could be up to 25-30%. Big difference.
And cooking changes it too, right? The source mentions ground beef losing like over 15% of its fat when you cook it.
Yeah.
And it gives some averages too. Well, let's see. Cooked pork, slightly over 10% fat. Whole cooked chicken, actually less than 10%. Salmon, around 13%. The main point here seems to be that the cut you pick, that matters more for total fat than whether it's beef or pork or whatever.
Right. Now, here's something that might surprise you. Monounsaturated fats, MUFAs. We usually think of those as, the healthy ones in olive oil or avocados.
Well, what's really interesting is this source highlights that animal fats are also like significant sources of MUFAs. Beef fat, it's about 45% UFA. Pork is similar. Chicken, maybe around 35%. Fish, about 40%.
Wow.
Yeah. The source pretty directly says these healthy plant oils are actually abundant in animal products too.
Okay, that is a different perspective. So what about saturated fats, the ones that usually get the bad rap?
Well, the source takes the view that saturated fats aren't inherently bad if, and this is a big if, they come from healthy, naturally raised animals.
Okay.
Looking at the numbers from the source, beef is about 40% saturated fat, pork around 35%, chicken roughly 30%, and salmon is about 20%. So, they all have significant amounts. And it notes the beef fat composition is actually quite similar to how we humans store fat.
Interesting. So the simple saturated fat is bad line. It isn't the whole story, according to this source. Okay. What about cholesterol? That's another big one, right? People worry about that with meat.
Absolutely. And the source tackles cholesterol head on. It finds that the cholesterol content per 100 grams is almost identical across different meat types.
Almost identical, really?
Yeah. Beef, pork, chicken, all hovering around 80 milligrams per 100 grams. Salmon's slightly less, but the source still calls it similar levels.
Huh. So the idea that cholesterol in meat is too terrible, as the source puts it,
is not true, according to this data, because the amounts are so similar whether you're eating beef, pork, or chicken.
That really does challenge a common fear, doesn't it?
It certainly does. The source basically suggests the fear around cholesterol in meat is largely unwarranted. Just based on these numbers, the variation is minimal.
Okay, so if total fat, these different fat types like MUFAs and saturated fats and cholesterol numbers, if they aren't the main differentiators, where does this source say the real differences actually lie?
Right. So this leads us to the remaining part of the fat picture, polyunsaturated fats, PUFAs. Now, these fats are essential. They include both omega-6 and omega-3 fatty acids.
Okay. And the core issue with the modern diet, according to the source, is getting that balance wrong. Too much omega-6 compared to omega-3.
Exactly. The source kind of simplifies it. Omega-3 is generally good. Omega-6 can be bad, but really in excess.
Got it.
And this is where the major differences really pop up, according to the source. Because that omega-6 to omega-3 ratio, it depends almost entirely on how the animal was raised.
Ah, okay. So let's break that down.
Let's do it. Beef, for example. Total PUFA is about 5.5%. Not super high, but critically, grass-fed beef has a healthy ratio. The source says around 2.1 to 4.1 omega-6 to omega-3. Considered very healthy.
Okay.
But CFO beef, from concentrated animal feeding operations, that has a worse ratio. Because the increase in PUFAs, it's almost all omega-6.
Right. Okay. And what about pork?
Pork has higher total PUFAs than beef, maybe 10, 20%. Pasture-raised pork, better ratio, about 10.1. But CFO pork, the source finds it significantly worse.
Yeah.
Jumps to like 20.1 or even 30.1. And again, the increase is all omega-6. Omega-3 is almost non-existent. So the source actually ranks CFO pork as worse than CFO beef in this respect.
Okay, and then chicken, the one everyone thinks is the healthy white meat.
Yeah, well, chicken has the highest total PUFAs among these land animals, maybe 15–30%.
Yeah.
Pasture-raised chicken has a ratio of about 5–8.1. Still more omega-6, but better. But CFO chicken, ratio jumps to 15–20.1, again driven by omega-6.
15 to 20 to 1?
Yeah. The source actually points out that CFO chicken starts competing with seed oils in terms of just how much omega-6 you're getting.
That's striking. CFO chicken, often seen as healthier, could be loaded with omega-6s depending on how it's raised.
That's exactly the source's argument based on this ratio data. Now let's look at fish. Salmon, the usual gold standard.
Okay, salmon has high total PUFAs too, right?
Yeah.
35–50%.
It does. And here's the really unique thing the source highlights. Salmon is the only food group here where omega-3 actually dominates omega-6. Wild-caught salmon has a ratio of about 1.4. That's 4 times more of the good stuff, the beneficial omega-3s, EPA, than omega-6.
Nice.
Farmed salmon, though, still gives you omega-3, but the ratio is worse, around 1.1, maybe 1.2. So the source notes wild salmon provides like 2 to 4 times more of those key omega-3s than farmed.
Okay, this is a huge takeaway for you listening. That crucial balance of omega-3 and omega-6. It depends almost entirely on how the animal lived. Was it pasture-raised or wild versus CFO or farmed? It's not just chicken versus beef versus fish. It's way more nuanced.
Exactly. The conventional wisdom just completely misses this critical factor, which is all about sourcing.
Okay, let's quickly touch on another compound that gets, well, a lot of negative attention, particularly with red meat. TMAO.
Right, TMAO. Trimethylamine N-oxide. The source explains how it's made. Basically, gut bacteria convert stuff in animal products, choline, carnitine, lecithin into TMA, and then your liver turns that into TMAO.
And the big concern is that high TMAO levels seem to correlate with heart and kidney disease, right? Especially in people who are already sick.
Yes, but the source makes a really crucial distinction here. It says this is a correlation, not necessarily causation.
Okay.
The argument is that high TMAO is typically seen in people who already have underlying metabolic issues, maybe insulin resistance or gut dysbiosis and unhealthy gut. Essentially, people who are already dealing with poor health. Healthy people with good gut health, the source suggests, they seem to process TMAO just fine without problems.
So you're saying the source suggests your gut health might actually matter more than the amount of TMAO in the food itself when it comes to the health outcomes.
That's the key insight it really highlights. And get this, here's another fact the source calls very interesting. Basically, nobody knows or mentions it.
What's that?
Fish. You know, the food praised for heart health. It can contain anywhere from 10 to 50 times more TMAO than other animal products.
Whoa, seriously, 10 to 50 times more.
That's what the source states. It really makes you rethink things, doesn't it?
Yeah, it absolutely does. Okay, so based on this deeper look, fats, cholesterol, the crucial omega ratios tied to raising methods, and this nuanced view on TMAO, how does the source actually rank the different types of meat then? Does it give a list?
It does, and it provides a ranking that pretty much overturns that common red bad, white good idea.
Clear it.
Okay, tying for the #1 spot. The source puts grass-fed beef and wild salmon.
Grass-fed beef at number 1, tied with wild salmon.
Tied at the top. The reasoning for grass-fed beef is that the source sees it as very clean, it contains beneficial CLA, that conjugated linoleic acid, and it has that beneficial balanced omega ratio we talked about.
Right.
And wild salmon is also #1 because, well, it's the best source for those beneficial EPDHA omega-3s. Though the source does mention potential toxin concerns, depending on where it's sourced, which is fair.
Okay, so properly raised red meat is right there at the top, alongside wild fish. What's next?
Tying for #3 are pasture-raised chicken and pasture-raised pork.
Okay, still good, but not top tier.
Right. The source considers them clean food if you source them properly, but notes their fat profile isn't quite as beneficial as the top tier. Their PUFAs are mostly omega-6. Although it does say pasture-raised pork might have a slightly better ratio than pasture-raised chicken. But it also flags that finding true pasture-raised pork can sometimes be tricky.
Gotcha. Okay, where does farmed salmon fit in?
Farmed salmon comes in at #5. The source says, look, it's still a decent source of omega-3 compared to the CFO land animals. But it comes with issues, like artificial dyes they sometimes use, poor living conditions for the fish, antibiotic use concerns, and that worse omega ratio compared to wild salmon.
Okay. And then we get into the CFO meats, I assume.
Yes. Number 6 is CAFO beef, worse omega ratio than grass-fed, obviously. And the source also agrees that CAFO beef is problematic environmentally, making a clear distinction between it and grass-fed.
Right.
Then, CAFO pork is #7, worse omega ratio than CAFO beef.
And bringing up the rear.
At the very bottom of the ranking, #8 is CAFO chicken.
CAO chicken is dead last, below CAFO beef and pork, but that's the one so often pushed as the healthy choice.
That's the exact point the source emphasizes. It's ranked bottom among these CAFO options, specifically because it has the worst omega ratio, the highest in omega-6. The source directly contrasts this with how CAFO chicken is portrayed in marketing, like in fast food ads, pushing chicken sandwiches as healthy.
Wow. Okay, so if it's not the type of meat fundamentally, but how it was raised and then what's done to it, what does the source finally conclude is the true, most dangerous meat?
Well, the source's core conclusion is basically that it's what we have done to the meat. The really critical factors are where the animal came from, what it ate, how it lived.
But the biggest issue, according to the source, actually happens after the animal is raised, right?
Absolutely. That's the kicker. It's the processing. The source goes into detail about adding artificial flavors, colors, sugar, high fructose corn syrup, loads of preservatives, binders, fillers. It mentions hundreds of additives, often listed just by acronyms. And the point is, often there's very little actual meat left in the final thing you buy.
And it gives examples like chicken nuggets, claiming they can be less than 50% actual chicken.
Yeah, with the rest being like chemicals, breading, which is often wheat and soy, also high in omega-6, and then it's usually fried in those omega-6 rich seed oils. Other examples it gives of these kinds of highly processed products are things like cheap deli meats, fish sticks, Spam, corned beef, hot dogs. You get the picture. And the source's argument boils down to this. Unless you are actively seeking out and choosing grass-fed, naturally raised, or wild-caught options, and checking for minimal ingredients, maybe natural preservatives like celery powder, then you are most likely consuming CAFO meat that has been heavily processed and, well, loaded with chemicals.
So the final word from the source isn't that red meat is inherently the worst, or any specific type just based on its label.
No, it's CAFO meat that has been transformed into what the source graphically calls a chemical experiment through all that heavy processing. That's the real danger zone.
Okay. So what does all of this actually mean for you, the listener?
Well, I think it means letting go of those really simplistic labels, right? Like red meat is bad, chicken is good. It's just not that simple.
Yeah, it empowers you to be a more informed consumer, to actually start asking questions about your food. How was this animal raised? What are all these ingredients listed on the package? Where did this actually come from?
Exactly. Understanding this helps you make choices that genuinely align with your own health goals. Recognizing that the source of the meat and how it's processed often matter way more than simply whether it started as a cow, a pig, a chicken, or a fish.
Here's where it gets really interesting when you just step back and look at the whole picture. This deep dive, it shows us that the conversation about meat quality is much more sophisticated than just counting fat grams or cholesterol milligrams. It's deeply connected to the health of the animal during its life and the integrity of the food that ends up on your plate.
Yeah, the conventional wisdom is truly flipped on its head here. CAFO chicken, so often presented as the healthy swap for red meat, can actually end up at the bottom of the ranking because of its omega ratio and all the processing. Meanwhile, properly raised red meat can be right up there at the top.
So the next time you're faced with choices, maybe at the grocery store, maybe ordering at a restaurant, remember that the real danger, at least according to this source, isn't necessarily the type of animal, but rather the industrial system that produced it and, crucially, the processing it underwent afterwards.
And this raises, I think, a really important question for you to consider. If the most dangerous meat is actually defined by these unnatural living conditions and heavy industrial processing, then what responsibility do we have as consumers to maybe seek out and support alternative, healthier systems that prioritize how animals are actually raised and the purity of the final product?
Something to think about. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive. We really hope this gives you plenty of significant ideas to chew on.